Rosie's gone. She's gone. 2.5 years, maybe even 3 years. I'll have to look back at the dates of continuously struggling with her on various different aspects, and basically her fight for life has just come to an end. So Rosie, I'll explain it all now. And this is, you'll see why she's never really been on the channel too much. It's just one of those things. Now Rosie is, see that top enclosure just there? Well, it's had a boa constrictor in it for the last 3 years. Not a big one, not anything massive, nothing special, just a standard common boa constrictor. When we first got her, we were actually told, oh, she's a red tail, just like everyone tends to do with baby boa constrictors. She's a red tail. And we rescued her, so to speak. We rescued her. The owner of her had a father who bred some quite high-end reptiles, quite local. Well, I say fairly local, in Manchester in the UK. And I can't keep looking. The father had died, and it was down to the daughter to figure out what to do with all the animals. She had absolutely no experience, no knowledge, nothing. She just knew there were snakes. And she put up a post saying she's got baby boa constrictor here. She doesn't need it, she doesn't want it. It's a nippy little thing. It struggles to eat, it keeps regurgitating. Now my mentality, which is typical, I know a few bits about reptiles, so now I think I know it all, was, oh, it's probably just something she's doing. She's obviously keeping him wrong. She's doing this, she's doing that, she's whatever. And that was my mentality on it. I'll be open and honest about that. Don't hate me in the comments. So I went round and picked up this baby boa. I kid you not, that big, maybe. Apparently 9 months old. So I thought, oh god, it must have been rejecting food or regurgitating food for a long time for it to only be that big. Either that, or she's lying about the age of the actual snake. So I get him home, I set him up. 3 days later, going with a feed, bang, smashed it straight away. Took it, and a really good feeding response. At this time, we assumed it was a male, because that's what she said, it was a male. And we just kept going like that. The first feed, quite rightly so, regurgitated, as the lady had said. And I thought, oh, it's a bit strange, I'm keeping it perfectly fine. It must just be because there's a new environment, there's a whole new setup. It's a new everything. It's not used to this. It doesn't know anything more than this, because as a baby, from birth, because boa constrictors are live bearers, from birth all the way up to now, she's always been in that setup, which I just, again, assumed was wrong. She regurgitated it. I gave her a week or so to let everything all settle down. I tried her again, she took it, and she took it down perfectly fine. But she never went to the toilet. And I thought, oh, it's a bit strange, but maybe that's because you notice within the reptile care, so there's a lot of, oh, maybe this. And it's always trying to reassure yourself, which is something I've learned to not do lately. If you have a question like that, contact your local vet, just for that little bit of reassurance. But I just assumed that was because she had no food inside her stomach. It's quite a common assumption to make in that sort of scenario. And that was confirmed on the next feed a week later. Again, if this boa constrictor was only small, and I wanted to get some weight into it, some nutrition into it, some food into it. So I gave her a week, so 5 days later or so, I gave her another feed. She took it, she kept it down. And I thought, yes, we're on a roll here. Let's just see if she goes to the toilet. She did go to the toilet. I think it was like 4 days later or so. Boa constrictors, they just take an awful lot longer to actually digest the food that they've got in their system. So that's why they say, give it a good 3 or 4 days before handling a boa constrictor after a meal. Just give them that time to digest. So I did that. Next meal, she started to put some weight on now, a feeding response. She's getting a lot more active. She's got some food inside her. She's coming back to life, so to speak. And she regurgitated the next one. I thought, but that's when I started to doubt a few bits, saying, well, she isn't really gaining weight, which I didn't really expect her to gain much. She'd only had a few feeds. I took her to the vets, basically. She was showing signs of improvement, but my overthinking mind just sort of went, I'll just get this checked out. And they said, oh no, it's perfectly normal, as vets do. So I brought her home, kept her on for the next 12 months or so. The whole goal to start with her was to rehabilitate her, get her back up to good health, and rehome her. And my estimated time for that was around about 6 weeks. I could stretch it to a few more extra months if needed. 3 years later, she's still with us. All because I didn't really ask the right questions at the start, I would imagine. But we went through that about a year. Throughout the next year, she regurgitated a few times, but she kept more food down than she did actually regurgitate. So I thought, do you know what, it's a plus thing. It's a positive. There's more positives than negatives. We'll keep going on this path. But once she started to gain weight, started to gain sort of bulk in her body, she started to get a lot more active, started upping the size of her food. I think that's where the thing actually went a little bit wrong, because she took her next feed, which was a bigger feed. She took it down absolutely perfectly. She kept it down. She went to the toilet. It was perfect, and I'm jumping for joy. I'm like, yes, here we go. We're getting somewhere. Consider this has now been over a year's worth of trying to get her up to her weight goal for her age and her size and stuff like that. And so I'm like, well, if she can keep down the next 3 feeds, I'll start putting the effort into finding her a new home. Great. She didn't keep down the next 3 feeds. The next 3 feeds were all regurgitations. So I thought, you know what? Now there's more negatives than positives. She's keeping less food down than she's actually eating. So I took her back to the vets and I insisted they done some actual tests instead of just looking at her, poking her, open her mouth. Do something here. So they sent her through for an x-ray. It showed up that part of her, the entrance into her stomach was narrower than what it should have been for her body weight, her size, her species. There was a malfunction. I can't think of the word now. There was a genetic problem within her that would never have been picked up had I not have pushed for that. So we reduced food down. The food wasn't going into there. It just couldn't fit through. And she, no matter how much she struggled to get it through into her stomach, it just wasn't working for her. So she just kept regurgitating. And I sat there, and I sat there with the information afterwards, and I just sort of, how could that genetic problem that they called a genetic problem stop her from eating, stop her from, or make her regurgitate? And that's the answer that I came up with. She just sort of, it didn't fit, so she regurgitated it. So I narrowed down the food, went back down to more smaller food sources, but more frequent. So instead of it being every sort of, at this time she was a good 4 foot long, so instead of it being sort of every, I think we were going every 10 days at that time, we knocked it back down to weekly food, but smaller food items. So she was still getting the same physical weight of food throughout the year as she would get on the less frequent, bigger meals. We just kept like that. She kept the next few meals down. We were going great. So I just put it down to, so she's a snake that can only really eat smaller meals. What do we do when she gets a lot bigger and she's going to need much more food? We can't just keep giving her these smaller meals. So I raised that question with the vets and I said, so what do we do? And they said, well, as she grows, that entrance into the stomach will naturally grow. It's just going to grow a lot slower than what would naturally happen. She gave it a proper name. I can't think of the actual scientific name that she gave it. But I believed them. I said, yeah, fair enough then, great. So as she got a little bit bigger, again, she was regurgitating the odd meal, but she was keeping more of these small meals down rather than regurgitating them. So I just kept at it, kept going and going and going. She suffered with a respiratory infection around about 6 months after that. And I always hate respiratory infections. I've had to deal with it twice now. One was a snake that I got in as a rescue, had a respiratory infection straight away, so got the injections, sorted that out. She went for a course of the injections, perfectly fine, kept it for a while, she rehomed perfectly fine. This dude, again, we thought she was a dude, she done all the course, it didn't heal. In fact, it got a bit worse. Not much worse, but a little bit worse. So I took her down there. Because normally, with a respiratory infection with me, I can just go down there. With Northern Exotics being a business, we have a business account with the vets because we do use the vets quite a lot. Even if it's just random little checkups or a little question or whatever. So we took it down there, physically took her there. And said, look, what's happening? There's been no improvement. Oh, well, with a boa constrictor, it takes a little bit longer. I was like, okay then, yeah, fair enough then. Got another course of the injections, still didn't work. What I ended up doing was the old trick of, now it was a respiratory infection, you had all the key symptoms of a respiratory infection, but I went down the old wives' tale of up the humidity and do this and do that, and that's what I did, and it cured it. 3 days, and she was perfect. Now obviously she was perfect on the outside, I can't see her being perfect on the inside, so I just kept at that for a good couple of weeks, and it seemed to work. She took a meal down in, she kept it down, she let it go, everything was perfect. She was a bit sluggish, but that's to be expected after she's had a big 3 weeks of just sat there with a respiratory infection, but we cured that. She's been a constant visitor of the vets. Now, a couple of days ago, again, keeps going on. I say a couple of days ago, it's actually about a month ago. We upped the food size, just like the vet recommended us to do. But we only upped it slightly because she's getting a bit bigger now. She needs that bit more sort of food inside her. But we can't feed more regularly because by the time one food's not digested enough, we're introducing more food. It's not the best scenario. So we introduced the larger food. She regurgitated it. Oh God, I was so worried and so panicky. So we left her, kept her active and stuff. Tried her again. Another larger meal again, just like the vet recommended. And this time, when she regurgitated, there was a little bit of blood on the regurgitation. My heart sank. Yeah, my heart sank. It was... So we basically left her off food for the next few weeks. Let her recover. My theory was, and the vet's theory was, that as she regurgitated that bigger meal, one of the claws could have scratched her throat and caused a bit of blood to come out. So that's the way, the logic we worked. The plan was to leave her for a couple of weeks, no food, let her heal up. She didn't live to see her next meal. She didn't live to see her next meal. The vet said it was either a genetic problem or a problem. Again, she said it was a genetic problem or a problem through incubation. Boa constrictors are live bearers. How can there be an incubation issue? I raised that to her. She went, well, the care for the female that was pregnant could have been slightly wrong, and she couldn't have self-regulated the heat, which I can kind of understand, but it's nice to catch a vet out every now and then. Yes, vet has now been changed, but I'm about to get her out, get her all cleaned up, take her out to the forest, and say my last goodbyes.